How do your feet feel right now? If you're wearing shoes, they probably feel fine, cushioned, supported, protected from whatever's underneath you. But take those shoes off and walk outside, and within about 30 seconds, you'll probably be wincing. Sharp gravel, burning pavement, a single misplaced pebble that feels like a knife. So here's the question that should genuinely bother you. For roughly 200,000 years, human beings had none of that. No rubber soles, no arch support, no leather. Not even a strip of animal hide tied to the foot for most of that time. And yet they didn't just survive. They ran down prey for hours at a stretch. They crossed continents. They climbed mountains. They walked on volcanic rock, frozen tundra, and sun-baked desert sand. Your feet right now would give out in minutes under those conditions. Theirs did not. Why? The answer changes everything you think you know about the human body, about pain, and about what feet were actually built to do before we decided to wrap them in foam. Let's start with the foot itself, because most people have never really thought about what's inside their shoe. The human foot contains 26 bones, 33 joints, and over 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments. That's about a quarter of all the bones in your entire body, packed into two small platforms at the bottom of your legs. Engineers who study load distribution will tell you that the arch of the human foot is one of the most elegant structural designs in biology. It acts like a spring. When your foot hits the ground, the arch compresses and stores energy. When you push off, it releases that energy back into your stride. No shoe has ever replicated this system perfectly, because no material behaves exactly like living tissue under load. But here's the thing about that spring. It only works correctly when the foot is allowed to flex, splay, and respond to the ground. When you encase a foot in a rigid shoe, you're essentially locking the spring in place. The muscles that would normally fire with every step start to atrophy from underuse. The small intrinsic muscles of the foot, the ones that stabilize each individual toe and maintain arch tension, they weaken because the shoe is doing their job for them. This isn't a fringe theory. It's basic exercise physiology. And it's the reason that podiatrists will sometimes prescribe barefoot walking as rehabilitation for certain foot injuries. Ancient humans had none of this atrophy. Their feet were, from infancy, subjected to the full range of textures and pressures the world could throw at them. And the result was a foot that performed nothing like yours does today. The most obvious difference was the skin. Skin is a living organ that responds to mechanical stress. When you put pressure on it repeatedly, it thickens. The outer layer, the stratum corneum, produces more keratin cells and builds up a callus. This isn't damage, this is adaptation. A well-developed callus on the sole of the foot is not a crude protective layer. It's actually a remarkable piece of biological engineering because it toughens the surface without deadening the nerves underneath. This is a critical distinction. A rubber shoe sole protects your foot by creating physical separation between your skin and the ground. It works, but it also cuts off sensory feedback. You can't feel the texture beneath you. Your nervous system doesn't know if you're on ice, loose soil, or solid rock, and it adjusts your gait accordingly only in crude, delayed ways. A calloused barefoot does something completely different. The thick skin absorbs impact and resists puncture, but the sensory nerves remain fully active. Studies on people who have gone barefoot their entire lives show that they can detect subtle changes in ground texture through their soles with extraordinary precision. Their brains are receiving a constant stream of information about the terrain, and their bodies are making micro-adjustments in real time, adjustments so small and fast that they happen below the level of conscious thought. For a hunter-gatherer moving through unfamiliar terrain, this feedback was not a luxury. It was survival, knowing whether a surface would hold your weight before you committed your full body weight to it, feeling the ground shift underfoot and correcting before an ankle rolled, detecting the give of wet mud versus the solidity of packed earth. All of this was being processed continuously through the feet. There's also the question of gait, and this is where things get genuinely surprising. If you watch someone walking or running barefoot who has never worn shoes, their movement looks different from yours. Not worse, different. When you walk in a shoe with a cushioned heel, you naturally land heel first. The shoe absorbs the impact. This heel strike pattern is completely normal for shod humans. But watch a lifelong barefoot walker, and they tend to land differently, striking more toward the middle or front of the foot, with a softer, more rolling contact. This matters because heel striking generates an impact transient, a sharp spike of force that travels up through the ankle, knee, and hip. Modern shoes dampen this spike, which is why we've come to rely on them. But barefoot, on a hard surface, that same heel strike would be genuinely painful. The body learns to avoid it. Ancient humans almost certainly ran and walked with a gait pattern that distributed impact more evenly across the foot, reducing stress on the joints, and they did it without thinking about it, simply because their nervous system had been calibrated by the ground itself. This gait shift also activates different muscles. The calf, the arch, the intrinsic foot muscles all engage more actively when you're not relying on a cushioned heel. Ancient feet were not just tougher on the outside, they were mechanically stronger throughout. Now, none of this means ancient humans never experienced pain. They absolutely did. Before calluses fully formed, the feet of young children would have been vulnerable. The months it took to toughen up were genuinely difficult. Thorns, sharp rocks, and hot ground would have caused real injuries. Infections were a constant threat. A puncture wound to the foot, which today would be treated with antibiotics and a tetanus shot, could become life-threatening in a world with no medicine. This is partly why the oldest evidence of foot coverings, found in archaeological sites across multiple continents, dates back somewhere between 40 and 70,000 years. The earliest shoes weren't about comfort. They were functional protection for specific environments. Extreme cold, where bare skin would freeze. Volcanic terrain, where sharp rock edges were simply too dangerous to ignore. Rocky desert surfaces heated to temperatures that would blister even the most calloused sole. These weren't the padded trainers we think of today. They were minimal wrappings, strips of hide or plant fiber bound to the foot to solve a specific, acute problem. The foot still moved. The arch still functioned. The sensory nerves still communicated with the ground. The wrapping was a targeted tool, not a permanent substitute for a working foot. The shift toward more structured footwear came gradually, driven not by biology but by environment and behavior. As humans moved into colder climates, foot coverings became essential for thermal survival. As agrarian societies emerged and people spent more time on the packed earth and stone surfaces of settlements, rather than the varied terrain of the wild, the relationship between foot and ground changed. And as craftsmanship evolved, footwear became a marker of status, culture, and identity, something that carried meaning beyond pure function. But that evolutionary shift happened over tens of thousands of years, not overnight. The human foot spent its entire formative history without structured shoes. 200,000 years of barefoot living built a system that was extraordinarily well calibrated to that reality. What makes this genuinely interesting is what it tells us about adaptability. The human body doesn't arrive pre-configured for one set of conditions and fail under any others. It adapts. The skin thickens, the muscles strengthen, the nervous system recalibrates, the gait shifts. These changes happen gradually over weeks and months and years of exposure, and they produce something that modern footwear simply cannot manufacture: a foot that has learned its world from the ground up. This is why researchers who study barefoot populations, particularly in parts of Africa, South America, and Asia, where many people still spend significant time unshod, consistently find lower rates of certain common foot problems. Bunions, which are partially driven by the narrow toe boxes of modern shoes. Plantar fasciitis, which has a complex relationship with arch support and muscle weakness. Certain knee and hip alignment issues that trace back to altered gait mechanics. The foot that grew up navigating rough terrain, spreading its toes on natural surfaces, and building strength through constant microload is structurally different from the foot that spent its life cushioned and controlled. Ancient humans survived without shoes for the same reason fish don't need water wings. The environment built them for the environment. Their feet were not unprotected because they had no choice. They were functional because they had never been removed from the conditions that shaped them. We look at bare feet on stone or sand and assume vulnerability because that's what our feet feel in those conditions. But that assumption is backwards. Our feet feel vulnerable because they've been insulated from the very inputs that would have made them strong. The bare feet of our ancestors weren't a handicap. They were the product of 200,000 years of continuous feedback between a living body and an unforgiving world. And that feedback loop produced something that, for everything it lacked, could do what our cushioned, supported, engineered footwear still cannot fully replicate: read the ground, respond to it, and move through it with an efficiency that required no technology at all, just skin, bone, and 200,000 years of practice.